Hello and welcome to a new video. Is that soothing enough? This is iOS 9 on my iPod Touch 5th generation, so I'll probably title this video iOS 9 on the iPod Touch 5th generation. So I lost my jailbreak. I ultimately decided to update to iOS 9 on my iPod simply to observe it. I was curious. And the TLDW of this video is do not update to iOS 9 if you're jailbroken, especially if you're on an older device, i.e. an iPod Touch 5th generation, an iPhone 4S, or even an iPhone 5. It is not worth it. This is a stripped down bare bones version of iOS 9. iOS 8.5 would be a more appropriate label for this firmware version. iOS 9 wasn't a monumental upgrade to begin with, and this is definitely nothing special. Performance-wise, I might be going out on a limb here, but I feel as if it's slightly worse than it was on iOS 8.4 when I was jailbroken. So it's... and I believe they were making, a stink about how iOS 9 was, more optimized for older devices with A5 chips and such. So one of the main features of iOS 9 is proactive Siri, but of course you don't get that on the iPod Touch 5th generation. If you scroll over to the right, you don't have that, what was it, like proactive menu? No, that's definitely fabricated, but you know what I'm referencing. That. There isn't that. You just have the traditional swipe down, you just have this swipe down, jerkily animated mess. It's just a standard spotlight. Let's just search Miami Dolphins. Let's see what will come up. That's very current, relevant, at least here. Dolphins. There we go. Want to know? That's definitely going to translate into a fantastic season for the Miami Dolphins, he said sarcastically. Moving on. We don't have much else. Like, I'd like to sit here and say, we have this, we have this, we have this. You have that, so you have slightly better Siri functionality as opposed to exponentially better Siri functionality on newer gen devices. And you have this news app, which is, I opened, it wasn't anything special really. It's sort of like Flipboard, except the UI isn't as polished and it's nothing interesting really. It attempts to tailor to your interests when you initially open it up, for the first time. Redundant, but for my tailored interests, for my personalized interests, I've selected US politics as well as numerous technology subsections, or subcategories rather, like iOS, Android, the works. But it's really subpar, and I couldn't imagine myself using this extensively, or even, ever. I have Reddit, I have other dedicated news sources. I don't really need this sort of, amalgamation of several sources. It's not. Ooh, one news story. I stand corrected. Let's see what. South Korea backed app puts children at risk. Oh no. And yeah, then it essentially just redirects you to the site, I believe, with a more minimalistic interface. I guess that's what they tout. There aren't any advertisements to my knowledge, because if there were, that would be a disgrace. But yeah, I suppose it's alright. But I wouldn't use it. And unfortunately, that's one of the biggest features of iOS 9, especially on older gen devices, because there's not much here. Let's go into the App Store. And loading. Now this was peculiar. I went on the App Store a few days ago on my iPhone, which is currently running iOS 8.4, because there's no way I'm ever going to update to iOS 9. And I opened it up and I saw these ad blocking applications. And to my surprise, they were exclusive to iOS 9.0, which I found to be... I'm told it confounds me as to how this is restricted. And moreover, it's restricted to 64-bit devices, which I don't believe that the processor's architecture determines whether you're able to run ad block or not. I know many 32-bit devices that indeed have the ability to run ad blockers, so I don't know why it's restricted to 64-bit devices. Of course I do, because Apple's a corporation. That's why. Moving on. Actually, no, that's basically one of the bigger features in iOS 9. And of course, the iPhone 4S, iPhone 5, iPod Touch 5th generation. I'm sure some iPads aren't able to utilize this because, of course, it's restricted. Thank you, Apple. And of course, we have the new font, San Francisco font. Not crazy about it still. Also, we get nice additions, Find Friends and Find iPhone, which are embedded into the operating system. Thanks, Apple, once again. Other than that, you also have Shuffle All, which is probably one of my favorite inclusions. Because in iOS 8.4, you had the inability to, shuffle your songs. You had to either go to a song, pick a particular song, and then the now playing view enable shuffle, which was inconvenient to say the least. And now they have a convenient shuffle all button. That's probably one of my favorite features. Dare I say it, it's probably my favorite feature of in iOS 9. That goes to show how insignificant of an upgrade I think iOS 9 is, especially on an older device like this. I definitely would keep my jailbreak if I were you. If you're rocking an iPod Touch 5th generation or even an iPhone 4S right now and you're jailbroken on iOS 8.4, there is no reason to update. No reason at all. Performance has, I would even say, declined slightly. I was surprised at a couple of instances. My iPod froze a couple of times. Momentarily, granted, but still, that's unacceptable and unprecedented. I've never experienced something like this before, even when I was jailbroken again on iOS 8.4 with at least 50 Cydia tweaks installed. Of course, rumor has it that Apple deliberately renders your older devices lethargic to get you to upgrade. It's ever so slightly different than iOS 8, so I'm unsure as to why it feels slightly worse in terms of performance. Maybe I'm just negatively influenced by iOS 9 and therefore I'm making that conclusion, but I've never experienced my iPod freeze before, like ever. But since I've updated to iOS 9 yesterday, I've experienced 3 instances of my iPod just freezing for 3-4 seconds. This generally took place in the settings application, which was odd. I would just scroll, it would become jerky, then just freeze for a couple of seconds. Actually, closer to 3 seconds. I actually timed it one time because the first time it just, I dismissed it. But then the second time it happened, I timed it because I wanted to make sure that, this is something that may be recurring. And overall, it's, I haven't had positive experiences. Now, iOS 9.1 beta has been released, and many people with older devices, namely the iPhone 4S, have been satisfied with iOS 9.1 relative to iOS 9. So I don't know why Apple decided to improve iOS 9.1 so significantly over iOS 9. Generally speaking, later updates in an iOS iteration are more stable than earlier ones. For example, I'm sure iOS 9.4.2 will be the most stable, especially relative to iOS 9.0. Same thing with iOS 8. iOS 8.0 wasn't too stable, but iOS 8.4.1 is extremely stable relative to iOS 8, so it's just a vicious cycle. But as of now, iOS 9 in its current state is definitely feeling unpolished to me, especially on this A5 device. So what do you get with iOS 9 on the iPod Touch 5th generation? Well, frankly, not much. You get the minor subtle things like the settings search or the shuffle all button in the music app or the revamped podcast app, but nothing major that would warrant upgrading to iOS 9.0, especially if you're jailbroken on a previous iOS firmware. I'd much rather have iOS 8.4 with a jailbreak than iOS 9.0 without one. Even if you're not jailbroken and you're still on iOS 8.4, it's not an immediate upgrade. Nothing really warrants the upgrade. And I'm willing to bet that performance will likely take a hit once you update to iOS 9, because that's what I've personally been experiencing. It is definitely not that smooth. And, you've come to expect it, especially since this device is now 3 years old. But with iOS 8.4, I really wasn't having any of these performance difficulties. So it's safe to say that this is an iOS 9 exclusive issue. So, of course, you get this carousel now, as opposed to the iOS 8 multitasking switcher. Of course, this isn't a review of iOS 9, because if I wanted to do that, I'd do that on my iPhone instead of my 3-year-old iPod Touch. I just wanted to demonstrate performance and just to let you know what you're missing if you have an iPod Touch 5th generation. But the subtle enhancements like the shuffle button in the music application can easily be remedied by a Cydia tweak, so even those little subtle features that are implemented into iOS 9 aren't worth upgrading over if you're jailbroken on a previous firmware. That, combined with the fact, I know I'm sort of beating a dead horse, that performance has been worse ever since I've upgraded, it sort of makes it a difficult decision to make. Even if you're not jailbroken, I'd sort of wait until iOS 9.1, just for the fact that you have that slight increase in performance by waiting and refraining from updating. I've been reinstalling things over the past 24 hours since I restored to iOS 9.0, so I've been using this relatively more frequently. But honestly, I haven't noticed degradation in battery life, nor improvement. Perhaps I just haven't used it long enough to assess it, or so. But I've heard some evaluations online of people saying that the battery life has worsened due to updating to iOS 9, so that's always something to consider. But I usually don't scrutinize my battery life. I'm not somebody who's obsessed with battery life. It's definitely not something that I care about too often, because it's not something that I'm often frustrated with, especially with a sort of sleeper device like this, something I don't use too often. I'll sort of navigate through the operating system just for you to get a feel of what it feels like. There we go. Let's hop into this. Of course, yeah. Scrolling is jerky, even jerkier than it was on 8.4. I didn't set up Google Play Music yet, so we'll back out of that. Let's go into the iTunes store. Oh my god, this is slow. The internet isn't even being used right now, so it's simply the lethargy of the device. Huh. Yeah, definitely not impressed. Let's go into YouTube. YouTube has actually crashed on me a couple of times. That could just simply be incompatibility with the operating system, or just because of RAM management issues, because this thing only has half a gig of RAM. Let's go into Yahoo Weather, sure. Yeah, and there's sometimes a bit of a delay when opening third-party apps in particular, which is slightly annoying. Yeah. Basically, I regret upgrading to iOS 9 on my iPod, so I think that should tell you something. Definitely wasn't worth it, and it's actually more frustrating because it's slower. So yes, don't update. There is no reason to. Even if you're not jailbroken, I'd advise just waiting until iOS 9.1, because frankly, there's nothing worth upgrading for, unless you really need that shuffle up button, which quite honestly, is something I've really appreciated, but you're better off just jailbreaking because you're not going to suffer nearly as much of a degradation in performance than you would with upgrading to iOS 9. But yes, this video is probably longer than it should be, but hopefully I gave you a relatively extensive look or a viewpoint. Yeah. Again, typical A5 processor fare, just made slightly worse because of the iOS upgrade. Yeah, but what is okay? That was odd. Backing out of that now. Really don't want to use Amazon anymore. Oh look, it's automatically installing something. Wow, how nifty. Let's go into videos. Wow, what a pause. That is inexcusable, really. I don't know what that was. So it's not only restricted to third-party applications. Even, yeah, no, definitely not feeling this. Don't. I bit the bullet and I regret it deeply, so don't update to iOS 9. And this font is still not growing on me. Enough pessimism for one video. I mean, the included wallpapers, I guess, are slightly cool / interesting. They removed the grass wallpaper, which was confounds me. I just can't stop being confounded. We have spacey wallpapers. Ooh, nice. And these as well. Textured wallpapers, I suppose, and, you know, your typical gradients. But overall, no. I'm feeling a meh. I got 2 out of 10. That's slightly harsh, but no, but it's just not a solid iOS update for older devices in particular. Great. That's it. Thanks for watching. I'm currently experimenting with my setup, so the lighting may be a bit mediocre, but yeah. I'll get over it, so you should too. It's mean for that to be passive aggressive, but thanks for watching, guys. I genuinely appreciate it. And take care. Bye now.